Okay, so in this section, let's take a look into zones. So zones means basically the level clustering, which means you can cluster your map into defined areas, and on those defined areas, maybe you can control their respective spawns or any other attributes. Okay, so right now let's see how we can divide this level. But first I'm gonna have some level initialized. Maybe we can use the what we can use about map roads. No, not this one. Maybe let's use pedestrian CRN. I'm gonna duplicate it and call this one as map underscore zones underscore CRA, and open that up, and let's select all the road actors. And then let's disable their pedestrian spawns and vehicle spawns. Okay, so I have this basic level. Right, now let's create an actor called zones where we can specify the zones. Right, the procedural roles, I'll create a directory called zones, and then let's create an actor called bp underscore zones. Right, this is one. Turn that up, and then as usual, let's what we can do. Let's place an arrow to detect the default forward axis, and then maybe a billboard, and we can sort of expand its size. Okay, and then let's place a box collision volume. Box collision, at its collision preset, I'm gonna add a custom collision. This should be eval static. I'm gonna ignore everything except pawn, right? Because when the player is reaching for dedicated zones, the effects should be applied. Therefore, we can ignore all the other responses and keep the pawn as the overlap because player is a pawn. Okay, right, then let's create a function to initialize this element. The construction script, I will call that function, and within this function, first let's add a vector called size just to control the size of this zone. And I'm gonna give like default value, like let's just say 1000 by 1000 by 500. This is just default size. And at the initialize, I'm gonna get the box and set its box extent based on that size. Compile, save. If you got the viewport, you can see we have a area like this, and you can actually place it on the level as well. Be over here, I will place it. You can see it's there. Okay, and also I will add some boolean for the debugging purposes. Let's just say debug zone, So I need to get subcategory called debug, and here what it should do is, let's take the box extent debug zones and set hidden in game. I simply negating this one. Compile set. And also I think for billboard also we can do the same thing. Okay, now if I select this volume and enable debug zone, you can see the billboard and the bound volume is visualized. Right, that is just for the debugging purposes. Okay, then what we can do, maybe let's add a text renderer as well. Maybe let's first add a scene component, and on top of the scenes, first let's add a billboard and then text renderer. For the billboard I will give 100 and text renderer I'll keep it as 0, and I will push it up like this. Maybe billboard scale is too much, let's just say 2 by 2. And this text renderer, let's set the horizontal alignment as center and vertical alignment maybe text center. And world size maybe 50. Okay, so now that text is there. For this text also, the construction script initialize function, I'm gonna control its visibility like this. Okay, right, now what else I can do? Right, now I have to define some metadata for this zone. For that I will create a data table, but first we have to define its row structure. So in the structs procedural rows, I will create a new folder called zone. Over there, let's create a new blueprint data structure called _zone data. And here I'm gonna simply define the zone name, which is a string. And at the BP, no, first let's create a data table. So the data tables, procedural rows, let's create a miscellaneous data table based on the zone data structure. And I'll call this one as dt_zones. Right. So here now I'm going to define set of values. So I'm going to have, like, let's just say 4 zones. You can have any amount of zones that you want, but just for the time being I'm going to have 4. And first one I'm going to name C1 and give it a zone name like downtown district. And C2, let's just say Market Street. C3, let's just call this one as financial quarter. And then we have C4, and I'll call this one as Old Town. Okay, so these are just random names that I came up with. In your scenario you can have whatever name that you prefer. Okay, right, now at the BP zone I'll add a new variable called zone, and this is basically a data table row handle. Make it public and assign it to the setup category. And as the data table, let's assign dt zones. And the row name by default, let's assign C1. Compile, save. Right. Now we should be able to read from this data table and populate the respective fields, right? So for example, let's just say we need to display the district name or the zone name as the text renderer. So how we can do that? For that, let's create a function called get zone data. This is a pure function, and it should return a value which is zone data structure, right? Then let's call get data table row, and the data table is basically given by this zone data table, and the row is again this one. And if we found the row, we can return this data structure. If we couldn't found, we're simply returning a null reference. Compile and make sure this function is pure function. Now at the initialize, what I can do is let's take the zone data and promote it to a variable called zone data. And then you can get this text renderer and set its text based on the zone data. So let's break it and append the zone name over here. Compile, save. If you go to the viewport, you can see the specific district name is being displayed. So currently I am in the C1, so it is downtown district. But if I change it to C2, it will be C2 district name, which is the Market Street, right? But just for the time being, I'm going to keep the default zone name as C1, which is downtown district. Right. Then what else we can do? Right. Then let's detect the overlap. For that, we can get the box component, and then let's implement the event for on component begin overlap. So at the on component begin overlap, I should be able to detect our player interaction and apply whatever the zone respected effects. So let's take the other actor reference and check for is player. So if it is the player, maybe let's try to maybe let's try to display the zone name. Take the zone data. No, we don't even need to get zone data. We can simply get the zone data from here, split the struct, and just simply print the zone name. Right, now let's see whether this works. Okay, it is working. So you can see now if I'm interacting with this zone bound volume, it is printing the downtown district. Okay, right. But I think it would be better if we move this entire logic to the level manager, because ideally the level manager is the one who holds the context for these sort of zones, right? So if it is better if we have some sort of centralized management of overall zones, so it will be easy for us to implement some events later on. So let's do some quick refactoring. what I'm gonna do is basically, let's go to the level manager, and within the level manager I'm gonna implement certain stuffs. Right, the first of all what I'm going to implement is we have the zone data function here. Yeah, let's first move this zone data function to the level manager. This should be assigned to a category called zones. But now we don't have this data table. So I'm gonna remove this one and explicitly add this zone. And this row name we can parameterize. Let's just say zone ID. Compile, save. Now at the zones, at the construction script, at the initialize, let's take a reference for the level manager. Get level manager. I want it to variable called level manager. And then we can get rid of this function. And at the level manager, let's convert it to validated get. And then we can get the zone data. Plug it to here. As the zone ID, I can take it from zone, split the struct, attach the zone ID. So this way now we can actually ask the zone data from level manager instead of utilizing it at here. So let's test that out. Okay, it is working. Right, so there we go. We have the initial setup for zones. And the next tutorial, let's see how we can sort of display the zone name when we enter into a new zone.